If you want to go hiking in Yellowstone National Park and are trying to figure out the best trails in Yellowstone, then you're in the right place. In today's episode, we're going to look at my top picks for the 10 best hikes in Yellowstone National Park. Hi, I'm James Ian, and I've written numerous guides and published several itineraries for Yellowstone National Park. I've actually written an article on my website, Parks Collecting, about the best 21 hikes in the park. But I've chosen the top 10 for this episode. But if you want to see even more awesome hikes, then just see the link in the description below so you can read about all 21. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe now. If you're watching or listening somewhere else, follow my podcast to get the episodes as they come out. By sharing my favorite Yellowstone National Park hikes, I'm going to help you choose the best trails for your own vacation. You'll know exactly what to expect, so that you can easily curate your own hiking list. You'll have peace of mind that you won't accidentally miss out on an epic trail that you would have loved, and you also won't bite off more than you can chew. Be sure to stay to the end, where I'll be sharing my number one pick for the best hike in Yellowstone National Park, and it is a real doozy. Let's get started.
Welcome to National Parks Collecting with James Ian. He's a national park expert. He is here to help you have the best national parks trips ever. Get tips, discover hidden gems, and learn all you need to know. This is your path to collecting national parks experiences, memories, and maybe even a stamp or two.
So, what are the best hiking trails in Yellowstone National Park? Remember to stay to the end when I'll be sharing the number one hike in the park. You won't want to miss it. What's one of my favorite hikes in Yellowstone National Park? One of my favorite hikes in Yellowstone is the Grand Prismatic Spring Overlook Trail. This is a 1.2 mile out and back trail. It's easy, although it does have a little bit of a climb at the end, and the trailhead is the Fairy Falls trailhead. Grand Prismatic Spring is the largest and the most spectacular of the colored hot springs in Yellowstone. You can see it up close from the Midway Geyser Basin walkway, but to see it in all its glory, it's best viewed from the Overlook, which is why this is one of my favorite hikes in the park. The trail is wide and flat for the most part and impossible to miss. It's not difficult to follow at all. After about 0.4 of a mile, you'll follow a small sign to the left, and then this goes uphill for about 0.2 miles. At the top, there's a small viewing platform where you get the best view in the park of Grand Prismatic Spring. It can be quite crowded, but people are usually pretty considerate and take turns taking photos. Then you can either return the way that you came, or you can continue on to Fairy Falls, which I recommend if you have the time. Something to keep in mind is that the spring is often covered in mist in the morning, so it's best to visit in the afternoon when the heat of the day has burned off the mist, or when the temperature differential that causes the mist has decreased. What's an easy hike in Yellowstone? An easy hike that the whole family can do is Biscuit Basin. This is just a 0.6 mile loop. It's on a boardwalk, so it's flat, it's easy, and it leads from the Biscuit Basin trailhead or parking lot through a small geyser basin that's named after the biscuit-shaped formations in the area. But the main attraction is Sapphire Pool. It's a hot spring that's an incredible sapphire blue color. It has to be seen to be believed. There are also a couple of other geysers and black opal pool that are worth seeing on the loop. If parking's a problem, and if you have the energy, you can hike here from the upper geyser basin. At the very far end of that loop, you can continue across the road and then do this short loop. What's another top hike in Yellowstone National Park? One of the best hikes in Yellowstone is the Mammoth Hot Springs Lower Terraces. This is 1.7 miles. It's easy to moderate. There are quite a few stairs, and there is an elevation change of about 300 feet. It starts from the Lower Terraces parking lot near the Mammoth Hot Springs Hotel. The hike, which takes you past the main travertine terraces at Mammoth Hot Springs, is one of the most unusual hikes in the park, I think, because it's different from all of the others. It's spread over several boardwalks. The boardwalks at the northernmost part of the Lower Terraces, which is the section closest to the Mammoth Hot Springs Hotel, is Hyman Terrace, which takes you to a 40-foot high travertine cone called Liberty Cap. And then south of Liberty Cap is a 400-foot long out and back trail to the colourful Pallet Spring, a picturesque area with lots of little pools and trickling water. The next path south loops all around Minerva Terrace. On the far side, slightly off-trail and close to the edge of the forest, is Cleopatra Terrace, a largish area of yellow and orange flow formations. Mound Terrace on the south side of the loop is quite colourful. The trail then climbs up to New Blue Spring and to the Overlook before passing around Grassy Spring and up and around Canary Spring. Here you can walk beside circular orange and white terraces with steaming water flowing down them and now dead trees as the spring slowly overtakes the forest. It's cool. Although most people do the entire trail from below, some of the upper part of the lower terraces is actually more easily accessed from the upper terraces where there's a parking lot. So you can do the lower half of the lower terraces from below and then do the upper part of the lower terraces from above. So today we're looking at top hikes to do in Yellowstone National Park. Another hike I strongly recommend is Mud Volcano. This is a 0.6-mile loop. It's easy and is accessed from the Mud Volcano parking lot. This is one of the many hiking trails in Yellowstone that goes along a boardwalk for your protection and for that of the environment. The trail loops past churning cauldrons of hot water and steaming caves and bubbling mud springs. It's definitely worth doing this hike for these alone. However, it's also a popular hangout for bison. The trail climbs a small hill, and at the back end of the loop you may see bison grazing on the meadow on both sides of the boardwalk and hanging out near Sour Lake. Visit early in the morning for the best chances of seeing the bison. What's a fun hike to do in Yellowstone National Park? Another of my favorite hikes is the Brink of the Lower Falls. It's only 0.8 miles return, but it's strenuous due to the steep elevation change. It starts from the Brink of the Lower Falls parking lot and trailhead. From the parking lot, the paved trail heads down some switchbacks through some trees, so there's not much of a view along the way. However, it ends at a small viewing platform that is perched right on the edge of the lower Yellowstone Falls. It's an incredible view of the falls up close as the waters plummet over the edge, as well as down the length of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. The return trip back up the steep switchbacks is quite challenging, so take your time. Also, parking can be a problem. The parking lot's not very big, so try to do this hike earlier in the morning if possible. Before we look at my other favorite hikes in Yellowstone National Park, if you're watching this on my @National Park Collector YouTube channel and you haven't already, please like and subscribe below. What's another hike not to miss in Yellowstone? A trail that has great views of the canyon and the falls is the Red Rock Point Trail. This is only 0.7 miles out and back, but it's really strenuous because it drops about 500 feet in that short distance. The trail leads from Lookout Point on the north rim of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. It's one of the best hikes in Yellowstone to see the Yellowstone Falls because you go below the rim and it has a really clear kind of almost front-on view of the falls. But the trail is, although it's short, it is very steep. It descends from the north rim down into the canyon for, as I said, a really breathtaking view of the lower Yellowstone Falls. From Lookout Point, take the trail to the right, and then it descends along a paved pathway and some wooden walkways and a staircase to the viewpoint that's next to a red rock that gives the trail its name. And then keep in mind that the trail back up is steep, so take your time. The parking lot at Lookout Point is tiny. If you do this hike a little bit later in the day and you've parked at the brink of the lower falls to do that hike, something you might consider is just walking between the two. It's about a 15-minute walk each way rather than getting back in your vehicle and then not being able to park at the Lookout Point. What's another top trail to hike in Yellowstone National Park? A great waterfall hike in Yellowstone is the hike to Fairy Falls. This is 5 miles round trip, but it's rated as easy because it's pretty flat. It leads from the Fairy Falls trailhead, and you can easily combine it with the Grand Prismatic Spring Overlook Trail, which is like a little side loop off the main trail to Fairy Falls. So you can go there, continue on, get back to the main Fairy Falls trail, and then continue along. From the Overlook, just go down the hill. When you rejoin the trail, after about half a mile, turn left at the sign to Fairy Falls, and then the trail continues through a lodgepole pine forest until you get to very pretty waterfalls, which, while they're certainly less spectacular than the enormous Yellowstone Falls, still make a really great picnic spot. What's an awesome trail to hike in Yellowstone National Parks? A really nice trail that I recommend is Porcelain Basin in the Norris Geyser Basin area. This is a 0.8-mile figure-8 loop that's rated as easy to moderate, and it leads from the Norris Geyser Basin Museum. You actually walk through this traditional tiny museum to get to the trail. Porcelain Basin is one of a handful of hikes in the park that takes you past multiple geothermal features. It's named after the milky opalescent appearance of several of the pools, which is unique to the area. You can see it from an overlook above really clearly. There are 2 loops that form a figure-8 loop. Something to bear in mind is that the parking lot at Norris Geyser Basin is often completely full between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., which is its peak period, and rangers will turn you away, so try to avoid that time if possible. What's an easy trail in Yellowstone National Park? One of the easiest trails is the Midway Geyser Basin. This is just a 0.8-mile loop that leads from the Midway Geyser Basin parking lot. And this one is not to miss because this is where the largest hot spring in the park, Grand Prismatic Spring, is. And the loop is basically around the Grand Prismatic Spring. From the parking lot, the boardwalk crosses the Firestone River and then goes around the nearest edge of Grand Prismatic Spring. It also passes the huge geyser crater Excelsior Geyser, as well as Turquoise Pool and Opal Pool. Something to bear in mind is that the parking area is small, despite this being one of the major attractions in the park, so it's best to get there early if you can, or later in the afternoon. There are large pullouts on the main Grand Loop Road as well, very close to Midway Geyser Basin, where you can park if the parking lot is full. What's my number 1 hike in Yellowstone National Park? So far, we have seen 9 amazing hikes. There's just 1 more left. Stay to the end to hear my absolute favorite hike in Yellowstone. But before we do, you may be thinking, all of these hikes sound amazing, but how do I put them all together into an itinerary, yeah? These hikes have different difficulty levels. They're in different parts of the national park. They have different highlights. You want to be able to put them together into an itinerary that makes sense for you. And maybe you're traveling with other people who would prefer different difficulty levels of hikes and are up for the easy ones but not the harder ones, for example, and maybe you like more challenging hikes as well. So I created some really detailed itineraries for Yellowstone National Park. They're for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and 4 days. And they have done all of the heavy lifting for you. They combine these hikes plus other activities in the park into really detailed hour-by-hour itineraries. For each day, there's a schedule at a glance, and then it breaks down into all of the detailed information that you need. There's hiking trail descriptions and maps. There's driving descriptions and maps. There's all the activities. The hikes are timed to avoid the worst of the congestion and make sure that you, as much as possible, that you get a parking spot. And there are different options at the same time in the same parts of the park for people who like to do different hikes. So there might be a longer, more strenuous hike. At the same time, there's another option for someone who doesn't want to do that hike, but there are other things in the park that would be good for them. So it's incredibly structured, but it's also got different choices that allows you to cater it to your own interest levels and fitness levels. There's a link to these in the show notes below. Just click through and it will take you to a page on my Parks Collecting website that has even more information. Gives you some sample pages so that you can see what to expect. They're really designed to take away the overwhelm and do all of the heavy planning lifting for you. So you have the comfort of mind of knowing that you're going to see all of the highlights that are possible within the time that you have in the park. All of these hikes are included, and you can just follow the links in the description box below. Now, as promised, what's my number 1 hike in Yellowstone National Park? Well, my favorite hike in Yellowstone National Park is the Upper Geyser Basin. The basic loop is 3 miles, but you can make it 4.5 miles if you add on observation points. It's 5 miles if you add on the extension to Biscuit Basin, or 6.5 miles if you add on both of them. But just the 3-mile basic loop is awesome. The basic loop is easy. It is moderate if you go to Biscuit Basin or Observation Point due to the additional lengths. And the trailhead is the Old Faithful area because this is the area of the park where Old Faithful is. But there's much more than Old Faithful. It starts at Old Faithful and then takes you past several other frequently erupting geysers, such as Castle Geyser, Daisy Geyser, and Grand Geyser. There are dozens of colored pools, including the incredible green and gold Morning Glory near the far end of the loop. You can add on an out and back hike up to Observation Point, which gives you more of a bird's eye view of Old Faithful without the crowds. So if you want to see Old Faithful without so many people around, that's a really great option. And you can hike all the way to Biscuit Basin and avoid having to find a parking spot there. I highly recommend it. If you do it, make sure you stop in at the Visitors Center first and get the timing for the geysers so that you can try to time your hike around the loop to see as many of them erupt as possible. A tip, if you get to the far end of the loop around Morning Glory and you're like getting tired and you just want to get back quickly, you can actually cut across to a service road that's nearby and just walk back along this flat, wide service road rather than along the winding boardwalk, and it will save some time on your return trip. If you want help planning your trip, check the links in the description below. There's a bunch of planning and booking resources there that you can use to plan and book your trip. And keep watching my videos to get even more help planning your vacation so that you have the absolute most amazing national parks vacation ever. And if you want to get notified about the next episode, subscribe and click below.